Welcome back to Chris's Guitar Couch, and I've got a new couch, another new couch. Takes up a little less space, you know. I want a lot of room for my musical and robotics activities, so I'm happy with it. And this will be the first video with my new couch, so I'm kind of excited about that. Also, I will be reading from a script, so that's exciting too. Today, I want to talk about scales. If you happen to be a beginner guitarist and you need to learn scales for some reason, you don't know why. So you Google scales in guitar, and then you get this list back of all of these dots. And what even is this? How do you use them? When you search for guitar scales online, you're going to find a lot of information, but not necessarily a lot of understanding about what they are and how they should be used to make your own music. I don't approve. I understand why it is. When you give people scales like this, it can get you to a place where you're playing something that sounds like real music very quickly. They're gimmicky, and it can give you a good start, but I believe it's at the expense of long-term musicianship. Like, if you wanted to become a great painter, you wouldn't start with paint by numbers. If you wanted to become a great writer, you wouldn't play with Mad Libs. You have to understand your tools. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What they can do, what they can't do, and how you can use them. Put them in your toolbox and use them to realize your own musical vision. All these dots on the neck, I don't feel like they give that kind of understanding. So I am going to demonstrate scales in a little different way than maybe you're used to, and hopefully it gives a little more understanding of what they are and why. I am going to be playing scales on a single string. I think it makes the scale patterns a little clearer, and once you know the pattern on a single string, there's a pretty easy trick that you can do to then adapt it to multiple strings, or however it is that you, as a creative musician, want to do it. The scale that we're going to start with is called the chromatic scale. It is really easy to remember. Chromatic literally means colorful, and I think it's because it is every note of the rainbow, not just the box of 8 Crayolas. To play this, let's start on the open A string, because I don't know why not. It's the A. So the first note is the open A string. We're going to play every note all the way up to the 12th. So the second note is on the first fret. The third note is on the second. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th. All the way, that is the high A, 1 octave above where we started. And you can go down too. So what chromatic scale was that? We could call it an A because we started and we ended on an A, but what if we wanted to play a B flat chromatic scale? Well, we'd start at the B flat, wouldn't we, on the first fret, and go up from there all the way to the 13th fret. But you notice I'm playing all of the exact same notes that I played for the A, so really there is only one chromatic scale, and use it in the exact same thing in whatever. If you want to give it a tonic name in order to make it clearer where the bass note is, you can, but that isn't that helpful. It's nice though, because once you learn one chromatic scale, you know all 12 chromatic scales. So that saves time. So if we want to write down this scale so that we can come back to it in the future if we forget what it is, a common term that we use in music and music theory are half steps and whole steps. And it's pretty easy. A whole step is the movement of 2 frets. So we can go from open to the second fret. That's a whole step. A half step is half that, which is 1, so we can go from the open to the first fret. The chromatic scale is all half steps. So this is easy. You just write it with a whole bunch of H's, and there you go. Put that in your notebook and you're done. In my opinion, this is really what a scale should be, not those dot diagrams all over the neck. Somebody has already taken the original scale and put it on the guitar for you. And I get it. That seems helpful at first, but you should be able to do this yourself and do it in a way that you need to. And if you know the pattern of the scale, you can do that. How you would do that is basically, there's a little trick where instead of playing all the notes on one string, most guitarists know that on the 5th fret is the same as the next open string. We use this for tuning. So here's a A, D, D, G, G. On the G, it's the 4th fret. There's a B and a B. And then the 5th fret again, E, E. So, if we're playing through the A chromatic scale again, we get to the 5th fret, but we know that's the same thing as the open. So we can do this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and there's the octave. That is the same note as the open A on the 12th fret. Now we can use that information and draw one of our own confusing dot scale diagrams, but it should make a little more sense now because we know where it came from and why. I started at the open A, but you know what? You could start anywhere you want on the neck and it works exactly the same way. So chromatic scales are great. You've got all the notes. They're really easy to remember and to play. Why don't we use that for everything? Well, as much as I love chromatic runs, I've never heard a song that I think had too many of them, including ones that I wrote. But they're really underused. They sound great. But a downside is kind of like this. Let's say your buddies come over and you want to jam. So you say, hey guys, let's play a song in A chromatic. The odds of what you're playing not sounding like a complete mess are low. I mean, I'm sure there are some jazz musicians who could pull it off, but most of us proletarian probably can't. So what we need to do is take some of the notes away so that we increase the odds of when we play with other notes and other people that they're going to work together. Scales are really a great tool to sort of take a bunch of random notes and start to turn them into music. And that's what we want to do. So let's start with the A chromatic scale and get rid of some of the notes. We're going to use some whole steps, not only half steps. So this is the A major scale. We can start off with the open. The 2nd fret is a whole step, another whole step to the 4th, a half step to the 5th, a whole step, a whole step, a whole step, and then a half step up to the octave of the A. We can go back down. That is a major scale, probably one of the most common scales in Western pop, classical, jazz, folk, country. All of the music loves the major scale. It's hard to play on one string. You're not going to want to solo that way, but don't worry. Once you learn it, you can do that trick from before where you figure out how to use it on different strings. But this way, you can visualize where the notes are and understand the difference, the intervals between them a little better. Also, if you happen to be playing bar chords, it's going to be a lot easier to know which chords you should be playing because they're all based on the A string or the E string generally. And that is pretty much all you need to know about the major scale, which is, there you go. Cross that off. We know 12 chromatic scales, and now we know one major scale. And since we know it on one string, we can use that same trick. There you go. Or you can start up here. I'd say the second most common scale that you're going to run into is the minor scale. And let's do that one. We'll start with the open A, go to the second fret, whole step. Next one is a half step to the third fret, a whole step, a whole step, a half step, whole step, and on the whole step. A little spookier, you know. Maybe you've noticed it seems kind of similar to the major scale. There are 2 half steps and the rest are whole steps. That's similar. And the half steps aren't right next to each other. They're spaced kind of about the same thing apart. Because as it ends up, the major scale and the minor scale are very closely related. The minor scale is the half step is between the second and third, and the fifth and the sixth step. Where the major, the half step is between the third and the fourth step, and the seventh and the octave. Notice I'm numbering the steps of the scales, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is a really handy way to name the note of the scale that you're on. Because what if you change key? Well, you're still playing the second note of the scale. Who cares where you start? It can be a great way to communicate with other musicians and to think about music. So back to those half steps. Here's the minor ones. Here's the major ones. You might notice that if you ever look on a keyboard, that there are black keys and there are white keys. But at certain places, a black key is missing. And this is where those half steps occur in this pattern. This is one reason why a keyboard is a great way to learn scales, because it's laid out specifically for these types of scales. They're called diatonic scales. Now on the guitar we have to memorize where they go, and I suppose on a keyboard you have to, if you start changing key, you don't get the nice guide of where the black and white keys are. So now that we know a few things about major and minor scales, I am going to show you a very cool trick. Prepare to be amazed. Are you prepared? I just want to make sure that you're prepared. Here's the minor scale. But instead of starting on the A, let's play the exact same notes, but start on the third fret, on the C. Well, darn it, that sounds a lot like the major scale. In fact, it is. It is called the relative major. So C is the relative major of A minor, and A minor is the relative minor of C major. They are the exact same scale, just starting. We could say starting, but you don't have to start. What makes the key is more complicated. I'm not going to go through it here, but if you hear the bass note, the tonic, as a C, it's going to sound major. The exact same notes, if you hear that bass note as an A, it is going to have a minor feel to it. And what's really cool about this is once you know the A minor scale, you also know the C major scale. Cross a few more scales off your list. But what about all the other places we could start playing? What if we started playing here? That is called the Dorian mode. What if we start on the E? That is called the Phrygian mode. If we start on the F, it's called Lydian. Starting on the G is called Mixolydian. And starting on the B is called Don't Do That, all right? It's a crummy scale that sounds like trash. No, okay, I'm not daring you to use it seriously. If you think you need to play in Locrian mode, there's another scale that will do whatever it is that you want better than that. Please just don't. We've talked enough about that one. Don't even think about it. Another thing is that now that we know these scales, they're not set in stone. A scale is not a formula for good music. You start playing. Start throwing in all sorts of notes that aren't part of the scale. You are the composer. You use whatever notes you need to use to do what you need to do. When you play notes that are outside of the scale that you claim to be in, they're called accidentals. I don't know why they're called accidentals, because you should be using them deliberately, not just randomly. They should not be accidents. They're happy accidents. Thank you, Bob. So remember, learn the scales. It's a good place to start, but you are the master of the scales. They do not control you. All right, well, we have learned a ton of scales today. We learned the chromatic scale, the pattern of the diatonic scales, and how each of them relate to each other. Going back, if we want to name them, give them all their modal names, the major scale is sometimes called the Ionian mode, and the minor scale is sometimes called the Aeolian mode. These are all named after ancient cities in Greece for some reason. I don't know, tradition. So learn them all except for Locrian. Remember that ignore that. You've learned so many scales today. Now, maybe you only know them on one string, but using the 5th fret technique, you can now create whatever scales in whatever key you want, wherever you want on the guitar. Now you are the master of scales, and you don't have to look at any of those confusing diagrams ever again. I mean, you can make them now. Well, now maybe they make sense. All right, okay, I guess you can look at them again.